what else am I leaving out? I mean, maybe we should get to the money stuff now. I mean, this is the part I'm dying.
The big ticket.
Yeah, the big ticket. Yeah, pardon the pun, because the truth is, I think, and Craig, you were mentioning this during the break. If you would have been on Facebook Live, you would have heard it live. Ding. is that a lot of folks who start this conversation begin amicably.
Correct.
Okay. It's not always, I caught him red-handed cheating with the neighbor. It's kind of like, hey man, we're growing apart. We love each other. Let's make this work. And unfortunately, when you've been doing this as long as we have, you see that all the way through more times than you want to admit. Right. And what's the percentage of those amicable beginnings that end as amicably as they had all hoped it to be, right? It usually ends up getting a little embittered and a little nasty toward the end. And how often does this have to do with the concept of believing you could do it on your own, right? So if that's true or untrue, find yourself inside that. The thing that's right next to that is that little wall that you have to hurdle is cost.
Right.
Right? So I think there's a huge unknown when it comes to that stuff. Like with what we do, there's kind of a general assumed idea of how much that stuff costs. Mm-hmm. But with lawyers, man, it's like one size does not fit all. It depends on who you get, depends on the case, all that stuff. So how do you address the whole cost thing so that it's not prohibitive for your clients?
Sure. Well, I upfront make sure that they understand the costs. I explain the retainer, the hourly rate, the court costs, so that they have a general understanding of how much their case is going to take. And each case is different. Everyone comes to me and says, how much is my whole divorce going to take? That amount is impossible to determine because, as we were just talking about, a divorce is like a roller coaster. One day you could be amicable and the next you could be completely disagreeing on every issue. Yeah. So I'm very upfront with my costs, and I get to control the costs that my clients are billed. So if I want to scale back maybe on some of the work that I've done, I have the ability to do that. Whereas in a larger law firm, the attorney and the billing department are two separate entities. So the billing department has no connection to the client themselves. They have no idea what's going on in that particular client's case. I work with my clients on a daily basis. I know what their financial situation is. I know what's coming up in their matter, so I can help them plan accordingly so that they have a good understanding of what the whole process is going to cost.
So if I'm in that spot and I'm wondering out loud, okay, about what this could potentially cost me, and I'm trying to measure and weigh that against as a buoying effect on whether I feel like I can do this on my own, get me kind of in the ballpark. Like, I know it's an impossible question. I just heard you say that. So I'm
Sure.
not trying to fly in the face of that. But typically speaking, okay, if it's not a total train wreck, but it also isn't perfect either, generally, what's that look like?
I know it sounds like a large range, but I would say between $10,000 to $20,000, and that includes court costs. Okay,
fair enough. So let's get back into process then. So, if I'm looking at this again, and I want to see all the way through, right? And again, impossible to do so because there's different routes and forks along the road along the way. But generally speaking, like, what's the chronological progression of that process from inception to fruition?
For the billing purposes?
No. Just for the entire process of going through it. Yeah.
Sure.
So from day one till...
Sure. So you figure out what proceeding you want to file. So do you want to terminate your marital status, or do you just want to legally separate?
Okay, that's good to know.
And from there, that assesses what documents you're going to file from the beginning. So I always start with, what are you in agreement on? Let's memorialize those issues. Let's get those in writing so that neither of you can change your mind.
And just as a superficial context, put terminate versus separate on top of each other.
Sure.
Why would one person do one or the other? Just totally generally speaking.
Normally, it's for religious reasons.
Really?
Some people don't want to actually terminate their marriage, so they'll file for legal separation, and then maybe they'll let their spouse be the one to actually file for divorce.
Interesting. So it's not a varying degree of how much you don't like each other.
No.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, good. Please continue.
Sure. So figuring out what you have in agreement is important. Usually the biggest issue are the kids. What are we going to do with the kids? And once we figure out that, everything else falls into place. So if children are involved, we start with custody. Then the support issues fall into place, the child support, spousal support, and then finally the property division. That's kind of the last issue we deal with. The house, how are we going to divide the house? Does it need to be sold? Things of that nature. And then the marriage is finally terminated.
And maybe we can walk through that. I'm just literally for selfish purposes because I'm learning just alongside everybody right now. What's the biggest pitfalls when it comes to the house part? Right. So let's just paint this picture because, again, we have to control the variables. Let's say there's a family and they all live in the house. Boom. That's the starting point. So what are some like key pitfalls that people you see make mistakes on when they're navigating through that particular variable?
Well, usually the spouse that moves out of the home is resentful. So they'll stop paying the mortgage, not realizing that that's their property as well. So they have as much of an interest as the person who's living in the home to maintain that mortgage so that when it does come to divide the property, you're getting the most out of the property and you're usually splitting that equity. So maintaining that family residence, paying the mortgage, making sure that you're keeping up with all of the other costs that are associated with the house are extremely important.
Do you feel like it maybe has something to do with that maybe they wanted to stay?
Oh, yeah.
And they kind of got booted and they're like, if I'm going down, everybody's going down?
Yes, people have a very strong connection to that family residence. And what they need to also take into consideration is if they want to stay in the residence, can they afford it?
Yeah.
They need to assess how much the monthly cost is. And if they can't, they need to develop a plan to get out of the house and sell it and get the most that they can for the home.
So true, man. Can you see why we had to get this gangster in the studio?
Yeah.
That's Nicole Boros, gang. And by the way, if you're getting even a drop smidgen of her wisdom right now live in Truth Radio, imagine what you're going to get by going over to borosfamilylaw.com. That's BOROS familylaw.com. And if you go down to her Contact Us page and you let her know that you heard her here, she's got the resource. And I believe what it is a summary of some of the charges that you can expect to have to consider when going through divorce. Is that true?
Correct. So typical retainer, hourly rates, and then court costs.
Hallelujah, gang. So again, that's over at borosfamilylaw.com. Hit the Contact Us and drop in. Make sure you mention Truth Radio so she knows which resource to get you, and go ahead and pick up your summary of typical divorce costs there as well.